Dear friends, it's a true pleasure to be here at KDocs 2024, and I have the great opportunity to share a few thoughts with you in relation with this great documentary by Amy Miller that is about to be shown, a documentary that is about a totally shocking case involving the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, namely the RCMP, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, namely CSIS. We are supposed to believe that CSIS and the RCMP have only one goal in mind: to keep us safe. Any of you are feeling safer knowing that Omar Nuttall and Amanda Korody spent 3 years in jail for a crime that was entirely manufactured by the Canadian security apparatus? I certainly don't, especially since there exist strong reasons to believe that CSIS and the RCMP have been playing their dirty games up to this day. Just consider this: the RCMP have 400 full-time undercover officers. And for those who are curious to know, this figure comes from a book that was published in 2022 by Fabrice de Pierrebourg, a journalist who has really good access to CSIS and the RCMP, which is not my case, by the way. That means 400 RCMP officers are playing full-time roles of gangsters and terrorists. Some even spend 20 years of their police careers just doing that, if we can still call this police work. And in order to look like successful gangsters, and they have to wear fancy clothes, eat at lavish restaurants, and all that jazz. That's our taxes dollars at work, my friends. Oh yeah, and they're also supposed to look scary, like real gangsters and terrorists, right? Anybody here feeling safer now knowing that the very people who are supposed to be protecting us can actually be really scary? Now please consider another figure. CSIS is working hard, so hard, to make us all safe, that 35% of their informants' activity are likely engaged in one or more terrorist offenses. And that quote comes from CSIS itself, so allow me to suspect that the real percentage is probably a hell lot higher. And for those who are curious to know, I discovered this 35% figure by reading a federal court ruling that was rendered on June 7, 2021. A federal court ruling, by the way, that went unreported in mainstream media, just like the figure of 400 full-time undercover RCMP officers. Are you feeling any safer knowing that our tax dollars are paying many CSIS informants engaged in terrorist activity? No, me neither. Well, some might say, you have to look like a real gangster or look like a real terrorist to successfully infiltrate those people. And that's the whole reasoning behind the Parliament decision to pass laws allowing all police officers, all CSIS agents, and all their informants to commit crimes that could send any of us behind bars. The problem I have with this reasoning is that you have to be assuming that the police and CSIS are targeting real threats. You have to be assuming that intelligence officers never make mistakes. Well, what about Omar Nuttall and Amanda Korody? What about Maher Ara, Abdullah al-Malki, Ahmad Abu al-Mati, and Muhayyad Noureddin? All Canadian men were tortured in Syrian jails because Canadian intelligence wrongfully labeled them as terrorists. All 4 men who received more than $4 million in compensation and official apology from the Canadian government. And what about the so-called Toronto 18, 14 adults and 4 youths charged with taking part in a terrorist plot in 2006, a case that was portrayed by some mainstream media as the biggest plot in Canadian history? Well, much less media attention was given to the fact that, at the end of the day, 4 adults and 2 youths were released after the charge against them were stayed, and 1 youth had even his charge dismissed. So we went from Toronto 18 to Toronto 11. Clearly, Canadian intelligence is not that much intelligent. Canadian intelligence does make mistakes, like all of us, I guess, with the important difference that their mistakes can seriously damage people's lives. So when CSIS and the RCMP claims that they're protecting us, I say, bring me the evidence. I say, show me the money. Because I'm not a blind believer in CSIS wisdom. And yes, I point my finger most specifically at CSIS because this organization is so much more secretive than the RCMP, even though the so-called mounted police is far from being a model of transparency, right? But the fact of the matter is that when you're arrested by the RCMP, the evidence, if any, is disclosed to you by the court, and thus you can respond to it. But CSIS is not in the business of arresting people. Most of their focus is on collecting so-called intelligence. And their agents are heard in camera most of the time when they testify in court. Another example, each year the Federal Public Security Ministry publishes a report containing the list of all the crimes committed by the RCMP and their informants. And for those who are curious to know more, those reports are online. But the fact of the matter is that the same is not true for CSIS. We're not allowed to know what crimes were committed by CSIS agents and their informants in the name of our own protection, or so they say. The only thing we're allowed to know is that CSIS agents committed a total number of 168 offenses between 2019 and 2022, with more offenses being committed each year. But again, nobody is telling us why CSIS feels the need to break the law more and more often. Does this make anyone feel safer? I'll take this for a no. I'll tell you how all this secrecy makes me feel. It makes me feel like we're being infantilized by a paternalist government who considered we're not mature enough to know the truth. If CSIS is doing all this law breaking under the very questionable alibi of our own safety, then the powers that be should not only let us know what CSIS is doing, but should also let us have a say about it. Oh yes, we're supposed to believe that federal watchdogs like the Intelligence Commissioner and the National Security Agency the National Security Intelligence Review Agency, namely NISRA, can protect us from abuse from CSIS and the RCMP. But as a matter of fact, NISRA and the Intelligence Commissioner have limited investigative power, limited access to state secrecy, and have no power at all to punish wrongdoing from CSIS and the RCMP. So between you and me, it does nothing to make me feel any safer. Thanks for listening, and please stay safe. Please stay safe from CSIS and the RCMP.